Shadow Empire, the complete story of Jeffrey Epstein. Prologue, the Island of Secrets. The helicopter blades sliced through the Caribbean wind, kicking up salt and sunlit waves below. Little St. James Island looked like paradise from above. White sands, crystal waters, and lavish villas that whispered of wealth untold. But paradise, as the world would soon learn, concealed horrors beneath its manicured surface. On that island, powerful men mingled with the young, the innocent and the coerced. Cameras never captured the truth, and the island itself was a fortress of secrecy. One man orchestrated it all, Jeffrey Edward Epstein. Behind his polished suits and billionaire, charm lay a predator whose appetite for control, power, and sexual exploitation knew no bounds. Chapter 1. Brooklyn Shadows. Brooklyn, 1953. The streets smelled of exhaust and baked bread, of hope and struggle. A boy named Jeffrey Edward Epstein wandered the crowded sidewalks, notebook in hand. Even at 6, his mind operated differently, always calculating, observing, plotting. His mother, Pauline, scolded him for being distracted, for staring too long at patterns in the world that no one else noticed. His father, Seymour, was a quiet, detached figure. School brought no respite. While other children played, Jeffrey devoured books on mathematics and science, developing a mind that saw systems and leverage where others saw chaos. Friends were few. Charm was his armor, intellect his weapon. This boy, small in stature but enormous in ambition, would one day wield power over the very elite who now seemed untouchable. Chapter 2. The Dalton School, a window to the elite. By the 1970s, Epstein had landed a teaching position at the Dalton School, one of Manhattan's most prestigious private schools. Though he lacked a college degree, his brilliance and charm compensated. He taught math and physics, but he also learned a new skill, navigating the world of the rich. Parents noticed him, Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and socialites. He was charismatic, witty, and unthreatening, a man who could talk to anyone. Make them like him instantly. Behind closed doors, he took note of influence, connections, and wealth. It wasn't enough to be intelligent. Epstein understood that power lay in proximity. The seeds of his empire were sown quietly, in corridors where few paid attention to the young teacher with an uncanny gaze. Chapter 3. Wall Street and the Birth of a Financial Phantom. The early 1980s were a turning point. Epstein moved from teaching to finance, joining Bear Stearns. The fast-paced, ruthless world of investment banking fascinated him. Numbers obeyed him. Deals bent under his persuasion. Soon, Epstein founded his own firm, J. Epstein & Co., claiming to manage the wealth of billionaires. But the truth of his clients and the sources of his fortune were opaque. Rumors whispered about tax shelters, offshore accounts, and unusual arrangements, but nothing concrete could touch him. Epstein was a financial phantom, present, powerful, yet untouchable. Chapter 4. The Emergence of Darkness. Money and influence could open doors, but Epstein's appetite extended beyond finance. By the late 1980s, he began cultivating a network of young girls, often underage. Recruited through manipulation, flattery, and gifts, these girls entered a system designed for control. The methods were meticulous: charm, money, and psychological coercion. Victims were promised opportunities, attention, even mentorship. But what they found was coercion, sexual abuse, and silence enforced through fear. Epstein was careful, surgical even, in his predation. He created layers of secrecy, grooming his victims while masking his crimes under the veneer of philanthropy and wealth. Chapter 5. Properties as Thrones. Epstein's assets became more than wealth. They were instruments of control. Manhattan Mansion overlooking Central Park, a fortress of marble and steel, where parties disguised as social gatherings became hunting grounds for his schemes. Palm Beach Estate, a sun-drenched mansion where neighbors whispered of unusual visitors and strange comings and goings. Paris apartment and New Mexico ranch. Private spaces for discretion and meetings with influential figures. Little St. James Island, the crown jewel, a private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands where Epstein exercised near absolute control over his victims and associates. Each location reinforced his untouchability. He could operate globally while maintaining a local veneer of charm, success, and philanthropy. Chapter 6. The First Hints of Accountability. The early 2000s brought whispers of legal trouble. In Palm Beach, victims began speaking out. Lawsuits and allegations piled up. Yet Epstein was untouchable, shielded by high-powered lawyers and a system manipulated in his favor. 2008 became a controversial turning point. Epstein struck a plea deal in Florida, pleading guilty to solicitation of prostitution with a minor. He served just 13 months, most of it in a comfortable jail setting with lenient leave privileges. Federal prosecutors could have pursued far harsher charges, but wealth and influence had constructed an almost impenetrable shield. Chapter 7. The Network of Influence. Epstein's world was interconnected with the globe's elite. From politicians to royalty, celebrities to financiers, many crossed paths with him, some knowingly, some unknowingly. His ability to access these circles was staggering, often using charm, money, and promises of discretion. Bill Clinton, multiple flights on Epstein's private jet and social connections. Prince Andrew, ties that would later spark scandal and legal scrutiny. Les Wexner, wealthy benefactor whose empire Epstein helped manage. High-profile academics, business leaders, and socialites all became parts of a network that blurred the lines between influence, complicity, and victimhood. Epstein's genius lay not just in predation, but in the construction of a protective web around himself, using wealth, loyalty, and fear. Chapter 8. The Fall. By 2019, the net tightened. Federal authorities indicted Epstein on sex trafficking of minors in Florida and New York. The allegations were staggering. Hundreds of victims, systematic grooming, manipulation, and abuse spanning decades. Witnesses recounted being coerced into compliance, intimidated, and silenced. Epstein was arrested, held in a Manhattan jail awaiting trial. The cameras followed him through cold corridors. A man whose empire of fear was collapsing around him. The public learned the full horror. But questions remained. How many had escaped justice? How many were complicit? How deep did the corruption run? Chapter 9. Death and Conspiracy. On August 10, 2019, Epstein was found dead in his cell. Official reports labeled it suicide, but the world erupted with doubt. High-profile connections, security lapses, and suspicious circumstances fueled a wildfire of conspiracy theories. The cameras lingered on Little St. James, empty and silent. Victims' voices echoed in courtrooms and media reports. His empire had fallen, but the shadows remained. The island, the properties, the records, all became symbols of a man whose power, wealth, and evil had intertwined to devastating effect. Chapter 10. Legacy of Darkness. Epstein's story is a cautionary tale of power and corruption, charisma and wealth masked predation. Influence protected crime. Victims suffered silently while the world looked away. The cinematic lens focuses on the small details, the frightened girl in Palm Beach, the whispers in Manhattan hallways, the hush of private jets and private islands. Each detail paints a chilling portrait of how a predator operated at the highest levels of society. The story is not merely about Jeffrey Epstein, it's about the systems, people, and structures that allowed such darkness to thrive. It's a reminder that